Hello and welcome to another episode of Crossing the Line, Tales from the Entertainment Industry. I'm Oliver Rednall.
And I'm Charlie Collicutt.
Today we speak with actor George MacKay, who has appeared in films such as Pride, The True History of the Kelly Gang, and the Oscar-nominated 1917.
In this episode, we talk to him about his experiences during his acting career, as well as his new film, Wolf, coming out in the spring of 2022. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, share and review on whatever platform you're listening or watching the podcast on. Thank you.
Hello, George. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
The first question I wanted to ask you is the films you've done, especially in the last few years, have been very, very different. Is there things you specifically look for when picking for a role, or do you just filter the offers that come through to you?
That's really kind of you. I think it's a mixture. Like, of course, there's always like there's the roles that you get or that you get offered. Is there's a bunch of ones which you fight for and go for and don't get to. But I think I've always been inspired by actors who the consistency is the difference in their work, and like be it the medium or the characters that they play. And I think that's kind of truest of acting in general, as I think hopefully you sort of shape shift is the point of it. So I guess there's part of me which actively tries to do that, but more and more it's just about the stories that feel right. And I just think, being blessed to continue working over time, the things that interest you or the way in which you want to work changes over time too. So that will hopefully just naturally create the difference in the body of work.
Mm. I watched Bypass recently,
cool.
that is so far from anything I've seen you do. And I was even like, this better be George MacKay, and I'm not getting it wrong. And I mentioned in this film that you wasn't even in, but you were so far from, say, like 1917 or your recent film Munich. Yeah. What sort of attracted you to that? Because you do a mix of big films and then sort of independent projects as well.
That's so kind of you to watch Bypass, because it's a much smaller film, and I think even when it was released, it had a much smaller release, and everyone just threw themselves at it. It was a real kind of passion project, really, from all involved. And I think what Dwayne, our director, and Sam, the producer, kind of created, and the whole team, given the budget that we had and the restrictions that were in place, it's an extraordinary piece of work from the team. So it's really, it means a lot when someone's seen it. And I don't know, I was just drawn to working with Dwayne first. I mean, I was much younger then as well. And Dwayne, he made his first film before that, was called Better Things, which is a beautiful, really brutal film. And Dwayne was an artist sort of before he was a filmmaker. And which I guess is, they're one and the same thing, but sort of more in the artistic kind of world. And I hope that's right in saying, but his first film, Better Things, was just so beautifully shot, and it was working predominantly with people who hadn't acted before and who had a kind of life experience close to the characters to the happenings that the characters were going through. And so in his second film, he had always said, I want to work with actors, but I kind of want the only thing to be different is that actors can do the things that I ask them to in a way that's kind of their craft, but I want them to become the people in the story, like the way I've usually worked. And so it kind of was a perfect timings in terms of, it was a long process to get the role and long auditions. His method, he works for a long, long time with you in the room. And then he sort of said, what are the ways you want to work? Would you be interested in method? Like, I want you to lose weight. I want you to do all of these things. But would you like to do, simple stuff like the character's always on his bike. He said, I want you on that bike all the time. He's always dealing with money because he's buying and selling stolen goods. And where would you put that money in? And I'd never had a project where I'd gone into it as much. And so therefore it was a real profound experience because of, to kind of suddenly be inside of those things, which you kind of go, I wonder what it's like when you do a job where you lose tons of weight or whatever it is. And so, it meant a lot to me, and the process of kind of the peaks and troughs of really getting lost in something, because without sounding pretentious, I did a bit. And and there's also sort of ramifications to that as well. So, but sorry, that's a very long answer to say it was mainly Dwayne, because when I saw Better Things and when he said the way in which he wanted to work, I was just, I was there at the drop of a hat.
Because the film very much feels like the characters are under a magnifying glass. There's not any huge expansive shots. It's very, very up close in your face. And I didn't know where it was filmed. You couldn't recognize anywhere the places, so it could have been anywhere. So it was very much these people. It's very much a snippet of their life. And the accents, I couldn't place any of that. Obviously, there was sort of more of a London twang on some of the characters, but the accents I couldn't place on some of them. So I thought this is a story about people, and it could happen anywhere in the world, essentially.
Well, that's exactly. Oh, it's so cool that you picked up on it, because that's sort of what Dwayne was saying. Is he said, this is Tim is a working class young man, but it's important that he's a sort of everyman in a sense, and that he's placeless. And so we're in looking to find the accent. I've got a sort of more middle class London accent, but also you don't want to just do London, because then that makes it very specific to London, and the North has a certain quality. So we were playing around with accents of the areas sort of around, and not to do any disservice to the areas around, but places like Luton or Coventry and things like that, where it's kind of before the Midlands, but it's not in London. So it was a process to find the voices of everyone, and we actually shot it in Gateshead in Newcastle.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Which is where Sam and Dwayne were living at the time and have a connection to. And so, which of course, Geordie accent and culture is so specific and has such a identity. We couldn't lean into that, because then it becomes a film of you're making a comment about Newcastle rather than.
Sure, because I heard one, I think it was the lady at the post office had a Newcastle accent, or at the hospital or something, and then I saw that it was there was a lot of Welsh funding for it, so I thought, maybe this is in Wales. So it really, but then by the end of it, I thought, I reckon this is it's a statement on the people rather than sort of where it's happening. It's sort of, these stories are everywhere.
Yeah. It was and Dwayne's, I really recommend it if you haven't seen his first film, Better Things, and that's kind of in the Cotswolds, which I guess in some ways is a sort of in between, essentially, definitely the big cities, and Tim's a kind of man in between and out of sight, and I'd be wary of saying he's not generic sort of working class, because that's a terrible statement to make, but it's of the I guess he's very specific, and he also represents a sort of broader situation. And so it was important that we were very detailed and specific about what we chose to do, but we made choices that could reverberate in a broader sense.
When did you shoot that?
That was actually 8 years ago. No.
Really? Because on Amazon the date was a lot more recent, and I did think I'm not sure how recent this film is.
With streamers, I guess maybe it's being bought, because it was, it went to Venice Film Festival. And to be honest, it had a tiny cinema release, which I know was difficult because for the guys, because for all involved, they wanted to make cinema, and it had a brief kind of art house release, which was great, but it kind of came and went in all honesty a little bit, which I know that the team that was tough, because it was a long process, and it was an amazing process. It was months and months, and we just. Dwayne and Dave Proctor, our DOP, the amount that we shot as well. He had a really interesting process of. I don't know if it was. He was just, what was wonderful about Dwayne is he was so hungry to experiment with a way of working, and he would send lots of videos. He sent films of the Dardenne brothers and things like that, and it wasn't to be wasn't to plagiarize ideas or anything, but just in terms of a tone. And we would do scenes again and again and again and again and again and again, to the place where you're sort of just you're just doing them, it's kind of unconscious. And then he would find the scene, and then he'd kind of go, okay, we've got it in the bank. We'd go even more, see if there's anything else. Did we find it? And if we did, that would become the new base. And if we didn't, then we'd work our way back through the levels. So it was for a very small budget, it was a long process. It was months and months in the end. But I'm really proud to be a part of it, and it was a profound experience for me in terms of work. So thank you for watching it.
No, it was great.
Do you feel that has affected how you go into films since then? So I watched True History of the Kelly Gang recently, and that talking about how you're intense in bypass, this is, whoa, you're psychotic in the best way possible.
No acting required.
Yeah, but like honestly, talking to you, you know, you're such a very humble, very lovely gentleman to speak to. But yeah, watching you in that, you feel like you could explode. You're like you're a piece of dynamite that's not been made properly. And do you feel that, you know, you took a lot of things from bypass that you brought into the Kelly Gang, maybe?
Yeah, I'm always slightly reticent to talk about sort of myself way of working, but I think bypass, I knew that it was a rare and special, a unique opportunity. And I guess it's always, you have the choice to do this, but it was, I recognized at the time, because of how Dwayne was encouraging me to work and wanted to work, it was a rare opportunity where you were required to go in. And if you wanted to go in, you went in fully. And I'd never done that before. And it was really amazing, but quite affecting as well. Like, and you know, with all sorts of things afterwards, where it's quite confusing to work in that way. But for the time of making it, it's extraordinary. And I also realized after that I didn't want to work in that way. For a time after that, I wanted to get better practice, because I recognized that it's unsustainable and having a life as well. And when the opportunity of working with Justin came about, I'd auditioned for a character in his film Macbeth, and I'd got to meet him in an audition. And Snowtown is one of the most affected I've ever been in a cinema. So when the audition for Ned came round, it came at a point in life as well where I was kind of figuring out, you know, what is it to be a man? You know, you're mid-20s, you kind of want to, you've got a sense that you want to put your own stamp on something, but you're also looking at what's made you to understand what that is. And yeah, all of those kind of things, I think, as a young man, particularly at that point. And so when this version of Ned Kelly, my dad's Australian, and so this kind of like, it's kind of mother-son relationship that's tied to your father and the lineage and all that kind of stuff, coupled with working with Justin and how he wanted to work. And it's the most intense audition I've ever had was for Ned. It was like an hour, and we just did all of these improvs that were nothing what I expected when I walked in. I prepped the scenes and got them as best I could. And one of them was for a speech in the film, which is kind of changed shape a little bit in the film, but essentially there was in an initial draft, it was a much kind of quieter reading where he's sort of saying one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist, kind of go figure, to his gang. And even the gang were a different type of gang at the time. And I'd sort of had it, and I thought it was pretty down pat. It was sort of around a campfire in that draft. So I sort of did it quite neutrally. And Justin was like, I did the first draft, and Justin immediately went, right, 20 press ups now. And I was like, well, he went down. And so I started doing these push ups, and he then just started talking me through what's going on. He said, after this, just stand against that wall, and I'm going to come over there with you and just look at Des Hamilton, the casting director. And so I'd done my push ups, and he against the wall, and he gently just put his hand against my face and just, you know, gently just put pressure on it. He said, just look at him, go again. And then it was like, okay. And then it suddenly had this new zone to it. And when we were in that zone, he was like, okay, now go again, now explain this and this, and now improvise this. And it was like, I remember coming out of that audition being like, I've been put through my paces as an actor more in that hour than I have in years. And so then when and that was just like part of it. And then when I got the part, which I wanted more than anything, Justin, basically, he writes a kind of manifesto for each character of like, what he gave pages of Australian film to watch, pages of music to listen to. He again asked me to change my body for it, which, you know, I think has its dangers in doing it for work and is not to be done lightly. But when you're sort of unified with a character properly physically, and the discipline that it takes to do that fully, it does kind of root you to it in a weird way. And I think I'd be wary of just going, oh, it's a great way in kind of thing, because it has knock-on effects. But for this one particularly, he's a sort of, this version of Ned is kind of the idea he's a kind of more sensitive man who's been brutalized, and so he needs to have the feeling of an alpha, you know, which is perhaps something I might not carry in my day-to-day. But for me to feel that, I had to change myself and live in that body, and that again changes you. So it's a long way of saying is that it was kind of a similar thing with Dwayne, that I think I recognized this is again one of those rare opportunities where it's you go all in on this one. And I think in being blessed to work quite regularly over the last wee while, I don't think you can do that for everything unless you take big breaks in between. And so part of the learning on those other projects is like, okay, how do I balance a personal life and work? How do I, like doing theatre, how do you live in it when you're off stage, or do you, because you just do it for 2 hours a day and then or do you stay in it? And where this was another one of those jobs where I felt like Justin wanted me to be in it, and I wanted to do that for Justin and for myself. So yeah, Bypass definitely fundamentally changed how I work, and how I'd like to approach work, because it also kind of gives you a sense of the extremes, because you kind of go, okay, that's when you really kind of go for it. That's what sort of that feels like. So it's made me sort of realize when I'm cutting corners, and also sort of when it made me recognize when I'm reaching my limit a little bit as well, and how to therefore just be a bit more placed at like, no, you need to work a bit harder, or the opposite of kind of going, okay, just be careful because you're at the beginning. Because another thing, like, sorry, jumping around, but like Sam said to me at the beginning of 1917, he's like, you've got to pace yourself with this one. Like because if there is no, it was very particular with each shot, because there was no beginning or end to each shot. 1 second starts and the next one goes, but knitted together. So you can't always do them in big zigzags of, it kind of has to have this kind of constant rhythm. And to achieve that, you can't sort of exhaust yourself on Tuesday, because you've got to give everything, but you can't like absolutely deplete yourself and like emotionally be spent, because on Wednesday you've got to come in at exactly where you left off on Tuesday, and then you've got to do that Thursday and Friday for 4 months. And he was saying, if he said to both Dean and I, but then later on when it sort of became just my character, or predominantly my character, if you go down, the production goes down, sort of thing. So in all senses, just look after yourself while you're doing it. And that was a lesson as to like, okay, it's like one job you sprint and the other one you jog, and you still kind of it's a different type of race, but that's sort of the lesson with each one, as to like, okay, this is the benefit of doing a marathon versus, the benefit of doing a 100-meter sprint, if you know what I mean. But each experience teaches you that, and I guess the joy of each experience is that the process changes you, or gives you insight into something, as to like, actually, I need to always do that on jobs, or actually you go, that's only specific to that job. And that's sort of within the intricacies of which each character requires, what the story requires you to do, and also what your crew and cast members require from you as well. Because like, there might be one job where you need to be in it fully, but there might be another job where you're there to facilitate someone else who needs to be in it fully, and therefore the best thing you can be is a bit more centered in yourself and approachable, so you're not throwing someone else off who's actually it's their time to play. So it's kind of, I don't know, it changes with each project.
When you look back on your films, like you were saying, you did Bypass 8 years ago now, do the meanings of the films change for you and what they mean to you? Because as an actor, you're captured on film, and as you change and the world changes around you, you might look at a film differently. Have you experienced that?
I don't usually watch them back. I love to see them at the end, and I'll usually watch them sort of, 1, 2, or 3 times, but never really any again after that.
But even when you think about them, when you sort of recall an experience,
I think not as of yet. I think they sort of, perhaps the emotions, sort of like anything, like they're like relationships, like they're kind of, you might not be feeling, you can't feel what you're feeling inside of them, but so far there's not been something that has changed shape completely the other side of it. I guess the nearest thing to that, which were jobs which feel difficult at the time, you then sort of look back on really fondly, because what they've given you. 2 years later you go, oh, that was what that lesson, like anything, it was good to learn because it was hard.
They say what's bitter to endure is often sweet to remember.
That's a good phrase. Yeah, it's like certain things like that. But broadly, I think I kind of try and have a sense of what something is as you're doing it as well. So not massively, but probably other ones. But even those difficult ones, I've genuinely never kind of resented an experience, or it's just been like, this is. And you keep talking about sort of running, but it feels like that, like, when you're in the middle of a jog or something like that, and it's difficult, but you're never like, I wish I didn't go here. It just is a bit difficult, and then when you get in, you kind of go, great, I feel much better for doing that.
Being an actor, it can be really demanding. What is the main misconception you come across that people think about you or being an actor?
I don't know sort of what people think of me, really, other than sort of, unless when I meet them, and when you're with them, I try and just be as I am. So hopefully there is nothing to misconstrue. In terms of acting, again, I'm sort of wary, like making it sound like certain things being, harder than that. I think there's certain things, but one thing that people might not know is the amount of sort of waiting that happens in between, and the kind of discombobulating nature of sort of like knowing where to place yourself when you're not working and when you're auditioning for something, and and it doesn't come through, when you don't realize that you've started to almost already do the job in your head, and then you even like time wise, like it's kind of the logistical things, I think, perhaps is what's I'm coming to realize is something I hadn't really thought about, and which I don't think people think about, is that you sort of kind of, you're auditioning for a job and you're getting closer, and you're starting to go, okay, I know what I'm going to be doing between these months. This is me for the next 3 months. I know that I'm going to have to move city, but that's okay. I'm really excited to do that. But therefore, I'm not going to put down roots just here, because I know that I'm going to leave in a second. And then you get that job and you go and move on, or you don't get that job and you sort of go, oh, well, I haven't been putting down roots here because I thought I was going to go there, and now I'm not going there. I should really start putting down roots here. But what if there's something else? All that kind of, just the discombobulating nature of waiting for something else to green light what you do. And I think it's important that's just the reality of the situation, and being at peace with that. But then also, I really admire people who don't let it completely own their day to day as well. And it's a sort of line to walk where I'm inspired by people who are committed to being there for whatever job is there or whatever opportunity is there, but also similarly people who don't completely shape their lives around it, because then when that thing goes, you go with it, kind of thing.
One thing you've just said there about kind of shaping your life around it, social media is in everything we do nowadays, and you see a lot of people, particularly actors, before any artist really, who's trying to make it nowadays, are going, you need to have social media, you need to have a presence, you need to be doing stuff. You don't really seem to get involved in any of that. Is that something that you've been aware of, or you've just gone, no, I've got my stuff, I'll sit back, or have you been pushed to do it?
No, never. Like, I think a lucky sort of generation, it's a generational thing. Like, I'm sort of that generation that was the first to get Twitter and Instagram, and I never got it. And it's just because I didn't want to at the time. And I don't really want to now. So I think I can sit on my high horse and sort of say, conscious decisions about this and that, but it was just a choice, because that's what I wanted to do at the time, and have sort of stuck to it as it's then grown around, the way in which the world works. But so I don't know if, how it would be right now to be leaving drama school or beginning work, and whether I think maybe I should, and maybe it's just one of those things. I'll have it for now, and hopefully, get your foot in the door and then let it go. But I think there's truth to, like, I think some of the time it does hold sway, but I think not enough to be a reason to have it, if that's the reason someone would have it. I think, of course, there's amazing connectivities that come with social media, and there is an element of the kind of industry of films and things, which there does, like, a level of popularity does come into it, which I think is a shame. But I hope that it's just like good works stands the test of time, and you know, and it's the reason that, you know, it's the biggest reason for anything. Like I think if the work is good and you're right for the character, or in whichever sort of capacity you're working in film and telly or theatre, like if the story's right for you, it will be for you. And no sort of, you know, I don't think you need social media to legitimize or to kind of to get a job. But also I'm wary of sort of, you know, speaking ill of it, because like good things do come from it as well. There's a connectivity, but yeah, to go back to it, for me, it's just never been a thing. And I'm a bit of an old man with my phone, and I think it would make me anxious, and so I choose not to.
Someone said to me when I said you were coming on, you seem like an old soul, and that's a good thing. And I thought that's really captured what I think, because a lot of actors, and this is not talking about the skill of an actor or how good they are, but there's a feeling you get from some actors, and I was saying how younger actors today, you don't quite get the same feeling that you do from like maybe the last generation or even the generation before that. But I think you've kind of captured that a little bit. It's kind of hard to explain because it's more of a feeling than an actual thing you would describe. But have you sort of been inspired? Who would you say your inspirations are from when you were younger as an actor? Do you have anyone that you draw upon specifically?
It's not like a singular actor or necessarily. I guess it's more performances. And then of course that performance will lead you to other performances that actor has done, or films. I mean, a formative film was Gladiator. So, you know, Russell Crowe in that, I think, is like, there's that kind of, you know, gravity to him and sort of charm at the same time. And then Joaquin Phoenix. And I remember Gladiator was such a influence on me because it was one of the first DVDs that we got. And so to see the filmmaking process and to have Joaquin Phoenix interviewed and him talk in a different accent, and I was like, he's American and he's nervous? What? Like simple fundamental things where I saw like Joaquin Phoenix go like, oh, Russell's been really nice to me. And whoa, you're not the same person. Like, and I just thought that was fascinating. And the scale of the sort of make-believe was amazing. So Joaquin Phoenix, Sean Penn, I mean, it was a bit older, but like This Is England, like that entire film, the first This Is England, and Stephen Graham as well. Gary Oldman, Cate Blanchett. Yes, it's like so many people. I think just kind of John Leguizamo in Romeo and Juliet, you know, Tybalt, and then in Moulin Rouge. Like I loved that sort of run of Baz Luhrmann's films, and just the sort of size of those performances, and of course Daniel Day-Lewis, and I guess like those chameleons, really.
One thing I was going to say is that the list of those people you've all mentioned are chameleons, and I think kind of the way you've talked about that seems to have influenced your work, because one thing I definitely say about you and how you've performed, you know, from Pride, starting at Peter Pan, to Ned Kelly, to Bypass, you know, you are a chameleon in the sense, and I think you've really taken aspects from those performers you've obviously admired.
Oh well, thank you. I think yeah, just that they're different in everything, and I think that's the craft of it. Like, and I guess it changes over time. Like sometimes as well, you know, realize that I guess when there's an element of choice in work as well, there'll also be stories that you think, oh no, I think I want to be part of the telling of this story. So it's not about what I want to do in it. It's just about kind of facilitating what the story is. And that then some of the time the changes might not be then it's about sort of doing what's necessary, I guess. And sometimes that might be a smaller performance, or that might be closer to something you've done before. And then you kind of get ones where you go like, this is a process that I want to go on. But I think as much as like, it's not about making a choice to do something different. I think so much of the time it's about the process that the director asks for. And I think that's sometimes recognizing a way that you want to try work in. And, you know, when there's that beautiful cross section of when a director asks you to work in that way, you know, like Justin and Dwayne saying, I want you to disappear into this. I want you to go and live somewhere else and be somewhere else, or beautifully when, a director kind of goes, no, I want you to turn up, do the job and go home again. I want that to be the test this time. Can you do that? And then you sort of realize when you sort of come up against, oh God, I'm doing a bit of work at home. Like maybe I should, it's not going to be fresh. I was just working with, Let's Talk of This Is England. I got to work last year with Shane Meadows, and it's amazing because you do a huge amount of backstory work, but then also you kind of don't know what's going to happen when you turn up to set. And it was a real lesson in terms of, wow, because when something exciting happens, it's so fresh, it's so kind of new as an experience, where oftentimes it's about kind of making something appear like it's never happened before. And that's the sort of satisfaction in like, we've created a moment that will be new to someone else, but we've all known about this for ages. And that's a maybe slightly self-satisfying way of working, where just to genuinely not know also is an extraordinary feeling.
One film that you've been working on in recent years is a film called Wolf. It's not out here in the UK just yet, but I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that at all. Yeah,
thank you for talking about that. That's a film. Wolf is directed by Natalie Biancheri, who's done her first film's called Nocturnal, and it's about the story is about this young man called Jacob who feels he is a wolf and is a wolf trapped in a man's body, and that conundrum is kind of the basis of the film and what drew me to it, in terms of like, even in saying that out loud, I'm sort of aware where I'm letting a little bit go. I'm letting go of what my interpretation as to like, could say he's a wolf trapped in a man's body, or whether you kind of take the audience point of view that he feels he's a wolf trapped in a man's body, because he's at this center where for young people who identify as animals rather than people, and they're sort of going through this what becomes more and more brutal therapy to try and change that. But again, like I think the simplicity of that first complex is felt so rich to it as something to explore, and that has reverberations about all kinds of times where you felt discordant within yourself in whatever way it is, but then because of the more because of the animal aspect of it, how he portrays that, it was always said in the script that when he is in his wolf state, he's fully in his body as well. He never sort of sprouts hair or anything like that. How do you do that? And that challenge as an actor was what drew me to it. And again, the process that Natalie wanted to do, she'd said from the off that we'd be working with this amazing movement coach called Terry Notary, who did I don't know if you've seen that film The Square.
No, I haven't seen that.
Ruben Osterland. Oh, it's great. The guy who did Force Majeure, and it's this great film about this about an art gallery and all the sort of like wankiness of the pretentiousness of this man who runs this gallery. But there's this scene where they have this performance artist who his work's been exhibited at the gallery, and his performance artist that he is an ape, but then he turns up at this dinner and he won't stop being an ape, and it becomes really intimidating because this man just won't stop, and that's Terry, and he worked on Planet of the Apes, and is an amazing movement coach, and worked with Cirque du Soleil and all this kind of, has an incredible life and career. But just doing the work with him to try and find what it is to be a wolf, and again, that's a human interpretation, but if this man legitimately is a wolf, how would he be? Like, what does that mean for language? What does that mean for movement? Does he smell and hear better than he sees? And so therefore, what's his vision like when he looks at people? Like, does he look at people? And all of this kind of stuff. And then if that is the case, once we've sort of found all the answers to those questions, how does that manifest itself in a human body? Because how do you hear better than you see, but also not have the ears to help you hear that well? All that kind of like, just sort of, so what is he like? And that just felt so rich as an opportunity to explore. I jumped at the chance of working with Natalie, and her first film Nocturnal is just brilliant. yeah, so that's Wolf, and I think it's coming out in March at the minute, and it's got Lily Rose Depp in it, who plays a young woman called Wildcat, who Jacob and Wildcat, we have well, I won't sort of tell you the nature of the relationship, but a relationship across our time at the institution.
And when did you finish filming that?
That was last summer. No, God, because we're in the new year now.
Yeah.
The summer before last.
Wow.
So it came out in the States in December. It was the summer before last. And it was really interesting because we began in March. We had a week's rehearsal in Dublin because it was an Irish film with Natalie, myself and Terry to kind of workshop the Wolf, just find the Wolf, play around with movement, play around with so many things. And then we were going to have a 2-week gap. And then we're going to have 3 weeks as a whole company to rehearse with all the cast and be on location. And in that 2 weeks, the pandemic kind of hit UK and the island and Ireland. So the film got pushed by months until August, I think it was. But in a sense, we planted all these seeds and found all of this stuff in that first week to practice. So, of course, you know, the pandemic was and is a terrible happening, but in terms of the time it gave us was actually really beneficial because simple things like the crawling was really difficult, and having 3 months to practice crawling made it much better than if we had, you know, the 2 weeks in between. So the film is what it is, I guess, because of that time. And, you know, Natalie and I across that time would be exchanging thoughts about the character and writing diary entries back and forth to try and build Jacob's backstory because he's such a silent character, so that we had an understanding between us. So when we came to it, we just had this bank of stuff and knowledge about him that we could then play with.
Is there any projects, I know that obviously that you get a range of things come to you, but that you'd really like to work on in the future, or like a genre or a period of history that you'd like to work in?
I'm intrigued by America as a subject in the history of America. I think just because of it feels like in so many ways with so many things being reevaluated socially and globally at the minute, and also with things like the internet kind of being the next industrial revolution that we're sort of in the midst of like, how do we communicate when, you know, with the internet? I mean, this is an incredible thing, but it's a new thing. And then also as a person, as like things in my life move and shift, there's sort of the new beginnings on top of stuff that's already been established, if you know what I mean. Like America seems like quite a fertile subject in terms of where like its history just sort of mirrors that, like, you know, a beginning on top of something that's already got something on it.
And it's so huge as well. It's such a huge place that you can go and be in a tropical climate and then in a sort of a snowy climate, you know, hours apart. And
well, even in like San Francisco, they've got microclimates within the same city.
Yeah.
It's like, it's bizarre just as a country.
And the people just spread across it are all from, you know, and it's quite a young country as well, like you say. It's very young. It's not old.
Well, they don't have history.
And also that, you know, that it's this amazing amalgamation of all these people that were there already or that have come to it for all different reasons. And so it's a very general answer, but like, you know, that, I mean, it was the same thing with when I was doing Ned. It was so interesting to learn about the history of Australia, which I didn't know anything about really. My dad's Australian, but we've only been to visit family kind of relatively few times over the years, and just to sort of see the building of a country, of like, you know, when the sort of the sort of convict states and everything, and then the sort of the white settlers that came there and how young it is, and that kind of looking at the sort of the people that built it and how it was built on top of what was already there and how that was, you know, taken away, and the kind of reverberations of all of those happenings. You kind of go, oh, right, well, they're just sort of interpretations, but you sort of get a sense of why certain things are the way that they are. And that's sort of fascinating. But it's also, you then kind of get that kind of simultaneous thing of being able to kind of explore something about the present, but also lose yourself in this sort of amazing bit of history where, you know, it be it sort of horses and, you know, sort of horses and carts or whatever it is. Like, so I don't know. I'm sort of intrigued by America because of all the new things that, you know, myself and the world is kind of finding at the minute, and America being such a kind of tangible superpower, but also being like one of the youngest places in the world is sort of, it feels kind of equivalent in some loose way. So I don't know what within America. Just thinking like, you know, you just want to be part of something like There Will Be Blood,
Yeah.
But that's not about America, but it is about, it's about so many things, but it's sort of using that context in a really amazing way to then have an incredible performance and incredibly cinematic. And yeah, it's about lots of things at once.
Just finally, is there any advice you would offer to any performers coming up or who are performers at the moment?
I think I've been so lucky to learn by doing, and I've been really lucky that I've got the opportunity to do quite often, and do when I was younger, before I kind of even was considering it as a job, and therefore certain pressures, that of course I apply now and would have applied, as to like how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, why to do it. They sort of never entered in when I was a kid, and it sort of gave me a really amazing group of experiences, which when all of those big sort of W questions like come into your head as you're older, which are legitimate as well, but sometimes can be even louder than just doing doing whatever you're doing. I think I've just been blessed to have experience. And I think what we were talking about earlier about the way it's a bit of a tricky one, because so often you're kind of waiting for that experience to be greenlit by someone else, not just financially, but whether you get the part, but just consider it. So just, I guess, sorry, I'm rambling, but I think to kind of legitimize yourself to do it as often as possible, and know that doing it, whether it gets received or seen or not, is doing it, and that will teach you stuff. Like, I just had an audition that I really wanted and I didn't get, and you kind of feel at the end of it like, that's been 3 weeks of work for nothing. And I got a message from a friend who I'd been running the lines with, and he was like, "You've been practicing your craft for 3 weeks." Like, and I wouldn't without that audition, I probably wouldn't. I might have watched stuff, I might have read stuff, but it's the most lines I've learned for a wee while.
We had Gabriel Byrne on the show last year, and he said, whatever stage you are at in your career, that sense of rejection, you never lose that. That's always there.
Yeah, that will always be there. But I think it's just about kind of legitimizing, like, no, I've been working for 3 weeks.
I think that's a really positive way of looking at it.
I've never heard anyone really say that.
Precisely. Yeah. I was going to say, I've never thought of it in that way of, exactly like you said, you've been auditioning, and yes, you didn't get it, so you're not going to be able to explore that further. But you have been for 3 weeks investing yourself, reading up on it, learning more about it, trying out new things. I think that's a really, really wise piece of wisdom. Yeah.
Stop talking, Charlie.
Thank you for saying that.
No. I think it's, I need to keep reminding myself of it. And I think, of course, then, like, as we all get older, there's like things you've got to pay the bills and all that kind of stuff. So you think, I really would like this job. But I think so much of the time, like, the work you do to try and get work or to find work is as legitimate, and sometimes even more fruitful than sometimes when you're on the job. Sometimes you get it and you might have a couple of days work over a month, and you are employed for that month, and so technically you're working, but because you're employed, you're not doing as much until you're there, because you only sort of say to yourself, well, I can only do it when I'm there. But when you're looking for work, I mean, what amazing practice to have. If you get an audition a week or something, you're learning lines for 6 days, you're reading up on it, you're watching YouTube videos or whatever, or like kind of practicing and imagining what it is. It's all practice. And I think that the thing is you only kind of consider things to be legitimate when other people see it too. But that's not the case. And if you hang your hat on that, then you'll go mad with it.
You mentioned rising up through the ranks before, and one question, I know it's always a little bit crass almost to talk about awards and all that kind of thing, but years ago you were nominated for the Rising Star Award at BAFTA. I just wanted to ask, like, how was that as an experience to be seen not only for an award, but as the industry of, like, these are one of 5 people who are going to soar?
It's an amazing thing. Like, it's it's really wonderful. It's a real honor and a privilege, and you know, for what we've just sort of spoke about, in some ways it's a kind of validation, because it's, you know, sometimes when you are doing the work and people don't see it, it's kind of tough to continue. But it's amazing. But I think in a sense it doesn't, all of a sudden it's like, it's just someone recognizing what you've done already, sort of thing, in a sense. So like,
it doesn't change it, does it? Even if you win, the work is the work.
It just I think all things are a relationship between what they are to you and what they are to other people. And that's when, like, you know, something like that is when someone's relationship to you changes, but it doesn't change what you've been doing and what you've done to get there. So yeah, I think it was a wonderful honor, and it is a wonderful honor, and I think take it for that and be grateful, or not saying be grateful, but like, you know, just, I think there's, I was very thankful for that, and took a lot from it, but also just carry on. I think just keep trucking, because, you know, that's something that will be said in a moment, and again, it's down to then the work that you do to either whether that's something that keeps getting said or not, but also that shouldn't be the reason for doing it. Just do it for yourself.
One of the final questions we ask on all our podcasts is there a film that you're ashamed you haven't seen?
Yeah, there's tons.
That was a proper turn to the light.
Yeah. Citizen Kane, for a start.
Oh, we've had that one before. Yeah. Okay.
Citizen Kane. I referenced The Godfather a lot, and I've not seen the third one.
Oh, okay. That's not.
Okay, I was about to say.
I know that's a sort of. What else?
I like the third one. Everyone has a go at it. I think it's good.
I've heard plenty of people. The second or third one, there's always that big fight about what is the best, or if they're awful. And
I'm not. God, there'll be so many. I'll think of a bunch of them after we leave. But I think Citizen Kane's a biggie.
You should watch that. That's really good.
There's so many where you just like. I've only watched them recently. Like it was, a little while. Or films which I didn't get the first time round. Like I must admit, I wasn't, when I first watched Taxi Driver, I was kind of a bit like. And then I watched Taxi Driver last year and was like.
Yeah, I get it.
I think it was sort of that. I think I was a bit young the first time round. As you know, you sort of don't realise what you're watching. So maybe those, and it took me a wee while to watch Raging Bull. I think there were so many Sundays where it was like I could watch Raging Bull, or I could just watch something easier. Finally, you do, and you think, no, that's why that's stuck around. So, but Citizen Kane is probably a big classic.
I think it's on BBC iPlayer at the moment. If you want to,
really? Oh, no excuses.
Yeah, it was on over Christmas, and it was one of those. I was like, I need to watch that.
Yeah, I went and saw it at the cinema recently. It's really good.
Oh, well,
really
I'm seeing the cinema recent, which I've not seen before. 12 Angry Men.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's great.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, it's brilliant.
Oh, you're in for in that film. It starts off high, and Sidney Lumet lowered the camera throughout the film and changed the lenses so it felt more claustrophobic.
Oh, really?
As the film comes on, but you don't notice it unless you're really looking for it. And then by the end of the film, it's like at table level.
Wow!
Excellent film.
That's an intense.
I love
film.
that. Like the camera language. That's what I've learned as well. Like we had a scene like that in 1917 where there's the scene where Colin Firth's character is the general, and he's kind of giving the mission, so to speak, and they were trying to figure the shot to kind of like Sam and Roger were working out kind of ways that the camera, because it's in a room where basically he's at the table and start one side and go the other, and we were rehearsing and working out all these kind of intricate shots, and then Sam was like, no, and he kind of went away and thought about it. I think I've got it. You've got to feel the dread, because you can't, it's impossible to look at both unless you kind of get a sort of two-shot profile. You can't take in his information and also feel it, because you can't see it being received. So if you can't see it being received, you've got to feel what he's saying. And so he's like, we're just going to have a camera movement that just never stops moving.
Oh, God.
And the whole scene is just that feeling of like, I want it to stop.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting. And that's that kind of, and then at a certain point it changes, but then the camera actually just never stops going. It's like being on a sort of conveyor belt to your.
Did you find yourself like recoiling slightly? It's like,
Yeah.
There is a scene in 1917 I want to ask where you're around the burning buildings. It's at night. It's just before you throw yourself into the lake. And I remember the first time I watched it, I was so tense watching it because I was like, "Oh my God, he's about to be shot. Something bad is going to happen to him." How was that to film? Because I was stressed. I imagine you, like, even though I'm
You've
perfectly
probably done it 10
safe, but
times.
you were like,
that particular shot, that run of the street from sort of when he makes it down the stairs to that run to jumping over the bridge, was we only Roger, the way that Roger wanted to shoot it was it's that gloaming period. The purpose of that shot is you see the bridge from night to day. And we were filming that in the middle of the summer on night shoots, and so we basically had 2 20-minute windows a night where the light was correct. So there was like, whatever it was, like 9:10 till 9:30, and then we'd have to wait all morning, all through the night, with down tools or rehearse, and then pick up for 10 to 4 till 4:15 or something. And so we'd put aside, and that's kind of amazing that we were able to do that with the film. But Roger was like, it's got to be in those 20 minutes because we can't make it we can't film at 11 o'clock and just grade it up. It's got to be what it is, that particular twilight. And so we'd scheduled 4 days because essentially, you don't have a day's filming each time. You've got 40 minutes to get that shot. And so we'd done 4 days to allow us 4 40-minute goes in it. And we just rehearsed in the afternoon, rehearsed. And we ended up getting it on the first run.
Oh, great.
It was weird because we sort of then had a chunk of time. We're like, we've just, we're ahead by 3 days now. The schedule would go behind because you wouldn't get, and then you go up and then you get something. And, so it was sort of like this bizarre, but in the doing of that scene, it was relentless. It was like sprints because we'd sprint, jump over, and then jog back, and sprint, and jog back, because it was like, we reckon we get one more before the light, one more. It's getting too bright. Go. So it was, it was exciting.
Oh yeah, well, it was exciting to watch as well. I was stressed.
Good.
Anyway, George, you've been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
To all our viewers, please make sure to like, subscribe, share with everyone you know. George has been brilliant. Thank you again. See you next time.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.